Over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of new information coming out about the 2021 redesign of the MacBook Pro, including a 14-inch and 16-inch model. A lot of this is confirming or strengthening older leaks. A lot of this is new information, and unfortunately, not all of it is good news. So in today's video, I'm going to go over the news and then talk about some extrapolations that we can take from this information. And of course, if you are excited like I am for this new generation of MacBook Pros, as well as the new iMac that's coming out in just a few weeks, make sure to get subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss a video. All right, without any further ado, let's hop into this. Okay, so the way we're going to go through this news is chronologically, and I'm going to go through each of these stories, and then we're going to talk about some key takeaways and kind of unpack what all of this means. So the first story is from about a month ago, and it was in Mac Rumors entitled "Apple Planning to Discontinue High-End 13-Inch MacBook Pro." So basically, this rumor is a little bit obvious, right? They're basically saying that within the year, the high-end 4 Thunderbolt port Intel MacBook Pro is going to be discontinued and replaced with a new model. That is what we would expect to see. It was sort of similar to the way the old iMac didn't get updated because it has now been replaced. That's what we should expect to see with the MacBook Pro. So currently there are 2 configurations of the Intel MacBook Pro that you can choose from. One starts at $1799 and one starts at $1999. The only difference between those is the $1799 model has 512 gigabytes and the $1999 model has a terabyte. So that means we could expect that a decent amount of the configuration details and pricing details would probably remain. I mean, look at the new iMac that came out, and it basically directly replaced the 4K iMac starting at $1299 and $1499, and then they did have a higher priced model at $1699 as well. So the next rumor is where it starts to get a little bit juicy. Basically, Apple got hacked. Well, not directly, but one of their suppliers, Quanta Computers, got hacked, and a ransomware group has been holding up these images and threatening to release more unless they get paid an enormous sum. Now, the long and the short of this was, this group released a couple of schematics for the upcoming MacBook Pros. And while I'm not going to show them here because I don't really like the idea of showing stolen documents, I have taken a look at them and they confirm a couple of things. So the main one that was going around online was a schematic for the 14-inch MacBook Pro. These schematics confirm a number of things that we've been hearing over the last couple of months. Number one, there is no touch bar. In fact, the keyboard looks a lot like the Touch ID keyboard that came out with the iMac. So the function keys are tall, not short like they would be on the MacBook Air, for example. And also there was a Touch ID key where the power button currently is on the MacBook Pro, so that would obviously stick around. Now, the other thing that this confirmed was a lot of the port layout. So on the left side of the device that was shown, by the way, was a 14-inch MacBook Pro. There were 2 Thunderbolt ports and a MagSafe connector, as well as a headphone jack. And then on the right side of the device was HDMI, another Thunderbolt port, and an SD card reader. Now, if you're like me, then the first thing going through your mind right now is, wait a minute, 2 Thunderbolt on the left, 1 on the right? So we're going down from 4 to 3 Thunderbolt ports? Well, unfortunately, I think it's actually gonna be worse than that. I think we're going down from 4 back to 2. And that's because, just like on the new M1 iMac, I suspect that USB Type-C port on the right side of the device is just a USB Type-C port, not a Thunderbolt port. And that also signifies that the 14-inch MacBook Pro might come with an M1 chip. That's a little bit disappointing, to be honest. We've thought for a while that the new generation of MacBook Pro was pretty much guaranteed to come with an M1X. However, it seems a little bit weird that you would get 3 Thunderbolt ports, or more likely 2 Thunderbolt ports, M1X is most likely going to bring back support for 4 Thunderbolt ports, multiple displays, higher RAM options. A lot of the problems that we saw with M1, or really the limitations therein, will likely be resolved with M1X. However, if this schematic is only showing realistically 2 Thunderbolt ports, I think it's decently likely that we end up getting M1 chips in this MacBook Pro. Now, another reason that I think this is the case is the next rumor that came out recently, and that is a MacBook Pro arriving with mini LED displays, apparently in 2021. Now, this is something that I've really been hoping for a while. We've heard rumors about mini LED coming to Apple products for quite some time, and as of the April 20th event, we have confirmed that that is in fact happening on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and I'm really excited for that because what it means is we can expect to see more devices with that technology. So this report is claiming that Apple is adding mini LED technology to 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros, and that these are going to be coming in the second half of 2021. This is great news. Honestly, the displays in MacBook Pros haven't changed a whole lot over recent years. The jump from normal displays to Retina was almost 9 years ago in June of 2012. And realistically, the underlying technology, even the pixel density of these computers, hasn't really changed all that much. Now, granted, it doesn't have to change. These are still really great color-accurate P3 displays. However, mini LED is definitely going to be taking it up another level. So this is another reason, unfortunately, why I suspect there might be M1 chips in this new generation of MacBook Pro. And the simple reason is you got to look at Apple's pricing structure, okay? So right now, if you want to buy an M1 MacBook Pro for $1299, you can get that with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. Or for $1499, you can get 512 gigabytes of storage. Apple charges $200 to double the storage, and they charge $200 to double the RAM. Now, the reason why these rumors trouble me a little bit in terms of the prospects of getting M1X in a 14-inch MacBook Pro, the more expensive Intel models start at $1799 and $1999 depending on the storage. If we are in fact getting a new generation of MacBook Pro, if it were to come with mini LED displays, a new design, more ports, and dramatically faster performance with an M1X chip at $1799, that is going to completely cannibalize the M1 MacBook Pro. Granted, I'm not saying that I wouldn't like that. Obviously, I want M1X to be as cheap as possible. I want this new generation of MacBook Pro to be as affordable and accessible as it could be. But imagine going from $1499 for an M1 13-inch MacBook Pro, jumping up just from $1499 to $1799. $300, and getting all of that extra stuff. That does not sound like Apple when Apple charges $200 for 8 gigabytes of RAM. So the most recent story, one that just came out today, is a little bit of an interesting one. We're gonna have to unpack this one a little bit. So the rumor is that next generation M2 chips are reportedly entering production to be included in MacBooks in the second half of the year. So this is a bit of a weird one. There's a next generation Apple Silicon chip. Now they've tentatively dubbed it the M2, which I don't think is correct, that's going into production and is expected to be available in mass supply around July. So the first issue that I have with this is M2. I don't think it's gonna be M2. I think what we're looking at here is M1X. On this week's episode of the Dark Mode podcast, which you can find linked in the description, I talked a little bit about why I don't think we should expect yearly updates for Apple Silicon chips. Quite frankly, the time that it takes Apple to implement something like the M1 chip basically precludes them from doing yearly chip upgrades. So on something like an iPhone, that's a once-a-year thing. There's once-a-year chips. However, that doesn't really work on the Mac, because think about it this way. If Apple were to do, let's say, an October update for the Mac chip every single year, we're not even getting this year's iMac until almost the beginning of June. So it would only have a couple of months before it would be outdated. And it just doesn't make sense. You don't get a full cycle out of that. So the way that I could see this happening is a lot like the iPad chips. Basically, I think the Mac chips, M1 to M2, is gonna be every other year. So if you think back on iPad chips, right? Right now, the M1 is essentially an A14X. There was no A13X. There was an A12X. And then before that, there was no A11X, there was an A10X. So for the last couple of years, iPad chips have skipped a generation. I would expect the same thing to apply with the Mac chip. Now, the other piece of information that we can glean from this report is that these chips are not going to be available until late summer. So that throws a little bit of cold water on our sort of background hope that we get this new generation of MacBook Pro at WWDC. Now granted, it is still possible that we could get a reveal at WWDC. Apple has done that several times in the past. In fact, 3 times very recently. In 2019, the Mac Pro was unveiled at WWDC but didn't launch until December. The same thing happened with the iMac Pro in 2017, and even before that with the Trash Can Mac Pro in 2013. All of those things were revealed and launched at WWDC and then didn't become available until December. Now, I don't think that this new generation of MacBook Pro is going to be a December thing, but I certainly don't think it's going to be available for purchase until the fall. So that might be a little bit of a disappointment to some people who I know were really, really excited to get their hands on a new generation of MacBook Pro, especially a new generation with more powerful Apple Silicon chips. But unfortunately, good things come to those who wait, but not too good things come, because apparently it's seeming less and less likely that we're going to get M1X in the more affordable 14-inch MacBook Pro. And in fact, all of these rumors kind of give me a little bit of pause about Apple Silicon. If Apple moves the M1 chip any further up their pricing stack, in my mind, it no longer becomes as impressive, right? I mean, in a $1,000 MacBook Air, the M1 chip is phenomenal. But if I'm paying $2,000, I want more RAM, I want more storage, I want more ports and more display options. The limitations of M1 are forgivable on an iPad or an entry-level MacBook Air. To me, they're not forgivable at $2,000. So Apple needs to be careful here, because the further they bring the M1 up their pricing stack, the less compelling it becomes. So I'm very curious, what do you guys make of these new rumors? Is this good news or is this bad news? I mean, I think for me, the biggest sad news is that we're probably gonna have to wait a little bit longer just to see what all of this is about. But it'll happen this year, so we just gotta be patient. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and as usual, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.